Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Hicks and I'm working with Mountain Stream TV. I'm very excited to introduce Lucy Christopher and Stella Moore, who are members of the Jackson County NAACP, and they'll be joining us today to talk about how white people can be better allies to people of color communities. So I'm really excited to have you guys today. I think you bring a lot to the table. Especially glad to see two very powerful women out here, so thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Very much, and with that, if you guys are ready to get started, I'd love to dive into the first question. So, and I think what I'd love for you first to talk about is give us a little bit of your own history. Just briefly introduce yourself and also what has led you to this path of activism that you guys are both working on.
Well, I think that my life has led me to this. Yes, I was born, of course, in rural North Carolina. I moved from North Carolina at an early age because my mother couldn't find work here. And I think at about 8 years old we moved to New Jersey. And when we moved to New Jersey, we began to, we lived in a neighborhood that was what they call ghetto in the urban areas because we couldn't afford anything better. And just seeing the lifestyle around me, I used to always say, I live here, but I'm not a part of this. I live in the ghetto, but I'm not a part of the ghetto. Because so often we are characterized as where we're living, that's who we are. But there are plenty of people that's very nice that live there, and they're not rowdy and all these other things. But you see the oppression there, you see the joblessness and the poverty and the different things, and that led me to becoming a part of the Urban League when I was an adult. When I was in my 20s, I became a part of the Urban League. And I worked with that a lot. And when I came back to North Carolina, I always was, I at one point was a member of the NAACP, but we didn't have an active branch in the area that I lived in. And when I came back to Jackson County came to Jackson County because I've never lived here before. And I decided when we had the branch, had them come out and offer the opportunity to open a branch in Jackson County. I got involved from the very first meeting, and I've been there since then.
That's wonderful. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is very wonderful. Lucy, do you have anything to tell us
Well,
about you?
yes, I was maybe just taking it for the first time, and I would think maybe Stella and I've talked about this before, but I didn't remember that you were born in rural North Carolina, that it was rural North Carolina. I was born in Piedmont, North Carolina, and lived there until, in Burlington, lived there until I married and moved away. And since then, I lived in Charlotte for 30 years, which is a long time, and during which time I became very involved in the civil rights movement, about the time of the civil rights movement, which is actually a large part of what was wrong with my husband and me as I became more and more active. But I always said I wanted to leave Burlington because I felt like it was the most parochial and it would never change, and I discovered racism there, I guess mostly as I grew older. It began to dawn on me that my father overtly was racist, and my mother in a rather subtle way that white women have of doing things. And so I had a good dose of that before I moved to Charlotte, and I had begun reading and thinking and just feeling, just like split very much. And that I'm sure that has a lot to do with how I became involved in civil rights. And then, after 30 years in Charlotte, we moved here. And where I live is in southern Jackson County. And as disproportionate as the black and white population is in northern Jackson and all of this area, well, let me tell you, I don't think it's a big secret. My husband said to me on one of our first trips to Ingalls, "Lucy, have you noticed something?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "There are no black people here." And I said, "Yeah, I've noticed it." Well, we had bought an inn, and we were very busy for a long time. And I didn't have time to see my old friends, to make new friends, or anything. The inn was running us. But by 2007, we had retired, and I became really active in the Obama campaign. I mean, really active. My life was totally turned around. All the kids were gone by then. That left me freed up, and I was still younger, and I met some people in Silva. Mostly I worked out of the gas station, which was the campaign headquarters. And since then, since Obama won the election, I became quite involved. First of all, in Occupy, Western North Carolina, which opened my eyes to many things I'd never had a very good education about. Number one, economically, I learned about the 99%. I mean, I was learning some of this before, but we really began studying as affiliates of Move to Amend. A deep, deep education that I am so glad I took part in, because I learned a lot about systemic racism and systemic everything in this country, and white privilege I learned about. And then, Stella, I'm not sure I've ever told you this as much time as we spent together, but a book, and maybe I have, a book that Stella's best friend wrote, Victoria Casey McDonald, was talked about. It was reviewed in the Herald, and I read that with great surprise and great interest. I mean, the way she wrote it, I knew right where that bus was driving from where she lived all the way to the other end of the community, to the black school, passing the white kids on the way, and the white schools. And it had the names of people mentioned in the book. It was interesting. Some of the names of some of the black people she named were the same names of some of the business owners, and that sort of thing. And then about the same time, I can't even straighten it out in my mind chronologically, there was the march on the 50th anniversary of the march on the war on the March on Washington, the war on poverty and freedom, or for freedom and jobs, and however it went. And at the end of that, there was a very loud call for beginning a NAAC branch in Jackson County, or in all the counties where the people who had attended were from. And so I knew that was probably something I was going to be involved in too, although I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do that and do what I was doing with Occupy. But by near the end of the planning session, I did get involved, and I was there when we voted on the officers. And I think Stella and I both were among the people who volunteered that day. There was a call for volunteers to be members at large. There was already a slate which could be added to for the officers. And I hadn't even thought about it. I mean, I really didn't even know about that. And just sort of on the spur of the moment, I thought, oh yeah, I want to do that. That'll get me more involved. And the rest is history, I guess, that we'll talk about today.
Definitely, yeah. It's obvious you two both, I mean, have incredible stories about how you got here and have a lot of passion for it too. What you guys are doing is incredible. So I'm excited to have you here to teach us. And as much as this is a learning opportunity for everyone who's watching, I feel like it's a learning opportunity for me as well. So I'm very grateful. But kind of what I want to start with is, could you clearly explain in terms of words and actions what it means to be an ally to people of color, especially in this current political and social climate?
Well, I think I started being an ally for myself, basically, in the beginning. You know, being African American, there's doors that's closed in your face. There are things that's closed to you. You know, even in school, I found that going to school in a mixed class, most of the time you kind of get overlooked. I've been in a classroom where I actually answered a question when they asked you to raise your hand, you know, and I raised my hand and I've answered the question correctly. And teachers say, no, that's not correct. And a white student say the exact same thing that I said, and she said, that's correct. You know, and it's that kind of in-your-face racism that you see every day that maybe white people don't pay attention to because it doesn't happen to them. And even on testing things in school, you can, you know, you look at it and you see what you made on the test, and then when the end of the marking period, your grade reflects much less than what you've done in class. And those are the kind of things that I saw. So I had to become an advocate for myself, because if you don't speak up for yourself, who's going to speak up for you? And I've never been one that was shy about saying what I think. So, and then when I had kids, I had to speak up for kids. As a matter of fact, when I moved to Jackson County, there was so much racism in the school. There was exactly 18 black kids in Smoky Mountain High School, which 3 of them was mine. And they had a really hard time when I first came here, and they would call them names. They would call them niggers. I mean, they would put like my son, he was in gym class, and but they put hangman noose on his locker. My daughter, when she went to her computer lab, she found a paper there with the Ku Klux Klan and a black person hanging in a tree. And those are the kind of things that I had to deal with. So I went to the school, and they told me that they would talk to the students and they would try to get to the bottom of it, but it's their word against the other students' word. And I went to the Board of Education and I spoke to them. I went to the State Board of Education and I spoke to them. So I went to EEO in Washington, D.C. So they had a conversation on the phone with myself and the superintendent of schools, and I told them the problem, and the school told that they were working on it, and I said they've been working on it long enough and it hasn't changed, and my kids are going to school here and they're going in peace. And I'm not going to have this, and they will not be harassed every day that they go to school. And when the Board of Education said that we were working on it, and so finally the attorney on the phone from Washington, D.C. said, Mrs. Moore, do you want to sue the Jackson County Board of Education? And they said, we can fix it. We can fix it now. And that was the end of that. And they did a program over at the school that supposed to be teaching tolerance through the Southern Poverty Law Center. I think they have the program. They do the program or whatever. They some advocates that work with them. So they decided that that's what they would do. But from then on, when anything happened in the school, they would call me and inform me right away, and that they had handled the problem and whatever. But it took that, and you know, when I think about it, even when I went to the Board of Education, one of the members of the board asked me, honey, you're not from here, are you? And I said, doesn't matter where I'm from. I'm here, and my kids are going to school here, and they will be treated fairly.
Yes.
And that's the way you have to really stand up to people, because they really, I think sometimes they really don't see what's wrong, because they've done this for so many years, all their life. They've lived this way and did these things, and no one have stood up to them a lot in many cases. And I think that they feel that it's all right to do these things because people of color is less than they are. But you just have to stand up and stand your ground, and I believe in that, and I always will.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very powerful. Lucy, do you have anything to add?
I'm in this for me too, but for different reasons.
Yes.
I have not suffered. I grew up thinking I was poor until one day when I was in about the 5th grade, and I was talking to a friend sitting next to me, and I said, "What did you all have to eat for Thanksgiving dinner?" And she said, "We had kale." And I knew that. And I want to tell another story which indicates something from the white privilege point of view. I can remember asking my mother, "Why am I being invited to do that? Because we don't have money." And my mother said, "Dear Mom, I'm so glad you're dead, because this is so horrible. Yes, but you're from fine stock." So this is the kind of thing that white people grow up with, you know. But yeah, tell me the question again, because I was responding to something Stella said.
No, it's so can you explain what it means in terms of words and actions that you might do of how to be an ally in this current climate?
Well, I guess to be an ally with black people or people of color, and that certainly is becoming more and more a situation in this country with the refugees and the Hispanic population growing, and our Native American population right here in Jackson County, is to stand with them along wherever I can and wherever I can. And if I'm asked to do something, to be as available as possible. And the other thing that I was told by a black friend in the fair housing movement so long ago, and I know it's right, what you folks need to be doing now is talking to your white friends and helping them to understand and helping with education. That's
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That kind of
Okay, I'm
What?
sorry.
what's it.
I would say give black people or people of color, all colors, the same opportunity as whites have. You know, give them a fair chance to education. Give them a job where they can make a decent salary.
Absolutely.
Make housing available to them that's not substandard. You know, there's the same opportunity that's available to you should be available to all people, and that would create a better environment, and it would be great for people, because you wouldn't have a substandard class, as they call it, basically. You know, it's people are denied the right to a job. I mean, when I look around Jackson County, I don't see black people. So I look at our kids, you know, they don't see themselves in what's going on here. I mean, if you go to the post office, if you go to a doctor's office, you go to driver's license bureau, go to a bank, go any place except to maybe Walmart, you don't see black people working there. Most of the jobs that black people have here are service jobs in the fast food industry and few in the hotel industry. Other than that, you don't see people in the courthouse. You don't see black people working there. In the hospital, I don't see black people working there. So if you're brought up in an environment where you can never see yourself, how do you have any self-esteem whatsoever? I mean, I have self-esteem because I wasn't brought up in that environment. You know, I saw people of color in different positions, you know, professional and all other. And if you never see that, it have to be devastating to a child if they're born here and they never see anybody of their color doing anything of importance, you know. So automatically I would think that you would get the idea in your head that I can't do anything other than this, you know. And so just allow people the opportunity that you have, and that would make a big difference in a person's life.
That's what our political actions are about. Getting some of those things, those rights,
Yeah.
legalized. Like many of them were already, and we've been moving backwards,
yes.
especially in the new Jim Crow, I think it's called. We are living in after the civil rights, the second Reconstruction.
I would even say even with your voting rights. I mean, I was born and raised in this country. I know that back to as far as my great-grandparents, I know they were born and raised in this country. Why is it that there are people that come to this country and they are first generation here, and some of them are not even first generation, and they get the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and decide that I don't have the right to vote unless they sign a piece of paper that say I have the right to vote. This is my country. I've been here as long as they have, longer than a lot of them. I've been here all my life. I should never have to have a piece of paper signed to say I have the right to vote. I have the right to vote because I was born and raised here, and I am a citizen of the United States of America. I am an American, even though I am a person of color. I am an American, then a person of color.
Very true. And that, I mean, I know that's been coming up a lot with the new voter ID laws that were recently passed fully, I believe, that you have to have an ID in order to go. But that, all of that kind of brings me into my next question that I'm wanting to talk about of, could you maybe both talk through some things that those of us who are not people of color need to know in order to be supportive and uplifting allies, and things that we can be doing differently, or things that we're not doing currently that we can be doing better?
Well, I think that when the way that most white people approach things, as if they're doing you a favor, rather than just, this is your right, and I'm here to be an ally to you. It's like, I'm here teaching you. You need to learn from me. And that's not true.
Yeah.
We do know how to do things, and we don't need somebody to hold our hand. We just need a fair shake, just to give us the same opportunity, and we'll get it done.
And to have that support behind you too, of just how many people, obviously agree that you know what you're doing, you can get in here. But that's very true of, I feel like that transcends a lot of areas of, coming in, you know better, let me tell you. And this was something I was going to save for later, but I think is really interesting. I know, from what I understand, a lot of the leadership positions in the NAACP are held by white people rather than people of color, and so I wonder if that's, if you find that problematic or maybe positive and uplifting, or what are your thoughts on that? Is it both? It's a very interesting question to me. It's one of the first things I noticed when I came here.
Well, it's not a problem for me, and it's not necessarily uplifting. It's basically because there are more whites in the NAACP, and we have very few people of color in the NAACP. So basically, if the whites didn't hold those positions, we wouldn't have a branch. But that's the reason too that some of our people don't belong to it, because they say it's a white-ran organization. But what people don't realize that the NAACP is an organization for all colors, and most people, no matter what nationality they think of it as a black organization, and it's not. And it's just like it's where you live. It's just like when you're talking about people that receive benefits from aids for dependent children or whatever. It depends on where you are. I mean, if you're in an area where there's more white people, there's more white people collecting those benefits. And it's the same thing with any other organization. If you're in an area where there's dominantly white, there's going to be dominantly white running organizations.
Very true. Lucy, it looked like you had something to add.
Well, I'm not sure. In the beginning, I felt okay, because it was very clear that, and I don't know who made up the slate or anything else, because I wasn't part of the planning committee, but we had a good representation, at least from my point of view. I thought it was fair and square, sort of, because it was fairly equal in terms of the officers and maybe even the members at large. I agree with Stella about everything you said, 100%. And I also, and I'm hesitating about talking about this. I have talked about some questions that I've had, because we started off with black leadership, and I believe that Reverend Lee himself went to our current president, who is Hispanic, half Hispanic, half white, but he definitely lived in Mexico, and he's doing a good job. He works really hard at keeping in touch with the state level of the NAACP and bringing all that, and it's a lot that he brings for a few people to do, isn't it, Stella? And I particularly because this is being filmed, and you can cut it out. It's as time went on, in the first year, I began to feel uneasy, and what I began to notice was, it seemed like to me that the white people who had come, and particularly the leaders and the officers and all who were involved, came from other groups where they had been the leaders. And so they had a lot of leadership ability. Well, I think the black people who came also had that leadership ability. And I know for a fact that a woman in Andrews had instituted something called One Dozen Who Care, and one of her first reasons for organizing that group, and Stella, you tell me if I've got this wrong, was to make sure that there was leadership knowledge and experience among the black members, and I believe originally it probably was mostly black people or all black people, and so there was plenty of leadership ability both ways. But there was this funny little dynamic going on among the white leaders, and I can be projecting and everything else, and I'm sure I have been a part of it. But it was like whatever came up on the agenda, there wasn't a second left that 2 or 3 at least of the white members of the executive committee began offering ideas and solutions and stuff, and it was almost as though our black counterparts weren't there or something. I'm sorry, and this is not entirely true, and it certainly is not entirely true that there weren't ideas and leadership from the members who were black. But I had this sense it was almost like a competition to see who had the best ideas and who cared the most. Or so. I'm sorry, I'm just, and I began to feel myself like, what's going on? And it sort of subdued me a lot of the time, and that's good, because I can be a big interrupter and know it all and everything else. But I've always had this question, was that where I felt the tension in the executive committee, and I don't know if it was just me. And I talked to Ann one time about my concerns, and she said, let's just wait on this, Lucy. Let's just, so, she may have picked up I was way off base. But I'm just going to throw that out there.
Thank you for being so honest about that, Lucy. We can easily cut that out. But.
Well, I'm just going to say that, because I'm not sure I've ever said it to Stella, and gotten her feedback on it. And I know there is a problem. And I remember talking to one of the members of the executive committee about this concern once, and he said to me, well, a lot of the people who are black are, unless he said, I just need to put this frankly to you, they haven't had as much education as some of us have, and they frankly are on drugs because they're in the poverty cycle. And they aren't going to see this as a sign of hope. And I'm going to throw all that out there, the 2 points of view that I have thought about and talked about. And I don't know whether Stella would like to respond to that or not.
I don't know. I think they're very boisterous, but so am I. When they
I know
say
you
something,
are. I know you are. But you usually hold back, and then you.
Yeah, I listen.
I know you're you listen.
Yes.
See,
and
we are not listening.
Yeah.
Is what I'm thinking.
I listen and I hear what's being said, and if I don't agree with it, I don't agree with it, and there's no change in my mind. And that's
or holding you back
because and maybe some people did leave because of that. I'm not sure of that, but I know that yes, they can be very, very outspoken, very boisterous, but then that's their opinion. But like I said, I have mine as well, and I will voice it, and I do voice it, and it doesn't matter at that point who really thinks is right or wrong. You know, you just have to speak up and say what you feel, because it's all about organization. So we all have a voice, and people. I wouldn't say that everybody do that, because I think some people. Now I don't know this firsthand, but I think some people of color have dropped out because of that. You know, but if you don't speak up, how do you ever get any place? You know, people have to know what you're thinking to be able to understand where you're coming from.
And you know, I've heard a number of white people say, "I'm dropping out because of thus and so, this person or whatever," and I would say, "What do you mean you're dropping out because of that person? You're dropping out because you're dropping out, and it doesn't have anything to do with the mission and the vision of the NAACP." And in fact, that's all a distraction and an enabling. I mean, disabling of the NAACP when people. But as I think what Stella said originally was, if we're not talking about it to each other, like we're trying to do today, and really stay on it for a sustained amount of time, we aren't gonna know, and it isn't gonna get solved.
Very true.
And the thing is, there's such important work to be done, and a lot of it was begun and is being carried on by Reverend Barber, and there are a lot of other good people still there at the NAACP, and there's a lot of good plans and agenda that need to be worked on, and desperately we need more people to do all the work that is being done. And I think I can speak for both of us to say you are invited to help and join in this very important work that covers the waterfront, because at the basis of all that's troubling us is the agenda to keep poor people where they are, whether they are black or white or brown. That's the basis of the agenda, to keep the status quo where it is, and they have kept it where it is, the 99%, where it is all these years, by setting up false narratives to divide us. And a great deal of our mission is to dispel those myths.
Very true.
It's true for all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I did initially get a little distracted with your answer to my first question, and I was actually hoping we could pop back for that for some, because I loved your first answer so much. But again, you know, what are things that allies can be doing differently that we don't necessarily know, besides just, you know, making sure we're not taking over the vocal sphere, but that we're listening as well. So I'd love any more thoughts you have on that.
Well, I think that with organizations like the NAACP, where people are working together, they are working toward a common cause, and just don't feel, like I said, my main thing is don't feel that you're teaching me something because I don't know anything. Just work and be an ally and treat me as an equal like you are, and we can get something done if we work together like that. I mean, there's not so much that you can bring to the table other than just offering your honest and sincere help in whatever way that you can.
I got some really good advice, personal advice, one time when I was in analysis, and I said, "But I don't know what I'll say." We had talked about what the problem was, and she said, "Shut up, Lucy, and listen." And I think to shut up and get out of the way and be part of it is what I can do. And not forget that one of the things that I need to do is to talk to white people. And well, I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, no, I find it interesting. You bring up this idea of you need to talk to white people. So what does that look like when you put that in action? I'm curious of how do you talk to the white people in your life that benefit from systematic white privilege, who might be overtly racist, who might be covertly racist, or in some ways are benefiting from that white privilege.
I feel like there's two questions.
If you want to take them apart and dissect them individually, definitely.
One of them has to do with just white privilege, and one of them has to do with one of the questions you asked us was about microaggressions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I never knew what that was until I took part in the educational. I knew it happened, but I didn't know that word. I would have had to ask you if I hadn't had that course that moved to a man what a microaggression is. I recognize the little subtle things that happen, and I recognize the big things that happen too. For instance, when I went to women's college, it was the first year, and this is a big thing, it was the first year that black women had attended the college. And guess what? Guess where Joanne and Betty lived? They were given an entire floor in the basement of one of the 6 freshman gyms. And many phone calls were made to placate the white parents when it came out in the paper. I did not know all of this until I went to my 50th anniversary, and Joanne was there to talk about it. Some of the things that they went through. So the administration forewent 2 floors of a dormitory, large dormitories, to provide a residential space for those 2 women to live in. And it really, the stories broke in the paper big time that summer, right before school began. And that was a big one. A big microaggression. The system is built for a microaggression. Tell me again what your question was.
Yes, it was how. Sorry. Let me find it. Oh my goodness, I have so many.
I've distracted myself.
I got a little distracted there too. I think I came up with that one on my own. But
well, it's a good question.
The question was, how do you talk to the white people in your life about these things? White people who
I don't want
have
to take
that white
up all
privilege.
this time. I thought about this question a lot, and I say educationally is one reason, but when you're on a 101, when it's a good friend, I've done everything from just simply bringing up what I'm doing and being excited about it, and people ask me more questions. But if someone says something, and particularly in my house or in a small group, I don't let it go by, ever. That's just, I don't think I have really. In the last year or two, because after the Obama campaign, I met the poor white people canvassing. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I knew after it was over, and I lived in Appalachia, for heaven's sakes. It was just so evident. But it was wonderful. And I felt like I belonged. Now I had met the people. Cassius has slowly become invaded by the second homeowners, and the town is divided. It is definitely divided between the locals and the new people, the summer people, or the second home people, who even, a lot of them stayed there all the time. And I have realized that my relationships that I've made with people have been very valuable, because I don't hide who I am with them. I have a new, really close friend, and I'll tell you how because of what I have learned about how the wedges have been built and things like that, I went to see this woman who is almost a neighbor of mine, and she and I have always known who the other was. We could even call each other's names.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew her son. He was a fine stonemason, and he worked for us and rebuilt a lot of Cottage Inn for us that needed some foundations to it and that sort of thing. She and I have become really good friends because this son killed himself a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that she wasn't, her people couldn't talk to her about dying because she would cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have in my background, having helped begin an organization in Charlotte for bereaved parents, a lot of history with people who are in grief, and I knew that was not a good sign, so I went to see her and I said, I've come to see you so we can talk about Johnny. And she just opened her arms up to me. We came in, and I go see her every week, and we call each other sisters. We sit out on the porch and talk at night, and when I did a particular civil disobedience thing a few months ago, or a few weeks ago, I guess, she was so excited and was so, she was so proud of me. And you know what? In the first few months, I would hear her say nigger. And I would just sit there because I understood where she was coming from. She didn't have a mean bone in her body, but this is what she's grown up with and what she's been told. And I slowly began letting her know what I was involved in, and it never made a ripple. And I mean, she wanted to help me figure out what I was going to do for community service. It was beautiful, and I thought, look at this. We know each other as human beings, and I know a lot of people as human beings who are poor white people and cashers, and they're the ones I call by my first name. They acted like they didn't know me for a year, but then I guess I stuck in there, and they are who my friends are, and cashers, and I'm for, I get furious about the privileged white people. I mean, the really privileged white people who come there and want to change their homes and their livelihood and take their property and build big expensive houses with it for a song back in when the finances went through, when the bottom fell out of the economy in the United States. I'm not even speaking very clearly anymore. I feel so passionate about this that I do well.
No, I appreciate you sharing that.
I guess I have a different way of approaching people who are more like me, and people who have been taken advantage of where I live. It's something I feel very strongly about. They're in the and I think they're beginning to hear from me stories that sound really familiar. They live in the same kind of situation that many people that they thought, Mexican and black were going to take their jobs because that's what they've been told.
Yeah, and you're able to, tell them this new narrative.
Well, when they ask me questions, I don't feel like I want to preach, but it can come out as it comes out because we have a relationship, and that's the only way I know that maybe I don't know who they voted for. I didn't know for sure who my sister, who's a Jerry Falwell person, voted for, but I found out, and I thought that was probably I probably knew. And
Stella, I'm wondering if you could speak to that as well.
Well, see, just what she was saying is something that I see as a problem. Like the lady who's poor, and she still talk about niggers. Why? Because she needs somebody to be less than her. And it's not that they can't change. They don't want to change, because they've lived this way, and they've been taught that we're less than them. And even when you're doing better than them, they don't want to see that. That bothers them when they see a black person that's doing well, because it makes them look less. But You know, these are the kind of people that really need to be allies of the people of color, because they all have the same problem.
Yes.
You know, and those are the kind of people that you see that call the police on people, on black people, because they're cooking out. I mean, black people because they're in the dorm, and you call the police because a black person is in your dorm. Did you speak to this person to see if they were a student, or ask or try to find any information before you went and called the police on them? And that's the kind of thing that black people have to deal with. And you see that, I mean, white police officers kill black people practically every month in this country. Sometimes 2 or 3 times in a month, a black person is killed by a police officer. Most white people, I mean, those that are activists, they are not like that. But most of the other white people, they say, oh, it's a shame. But the police officer's job, I mean, life is threatened every day. Well, they don't shoot other people of white persuasion like that every day. And I want to know, when do you feel that your life is in danger when you have a weapon and I don't have one? You know, and that's the thing that I look at. And even in the churches, the white churches, you see that they say, well, it's a shame, but they don't take it any further. You don't see any activism about that. And those are the things that I'm passionate about. Why do my people die every day and nobody think there's anything wrong? Because you're not of value because of the color of your skin? Do you think that these people don't have families? They think that we don't love our people like they love their people? I mean, I've heard Cicely Tyson say once, when she made the movie Sounder, that she did an interview with a white reporter. And what she said to her, I watched the movie and I think it's a great movie, but there's no way that black people can love each other like that. Where did they get such things? Where did they get such information? Why is it that we're subhuman, that we don't have feelings, that we can't love, that our people don't mean anything to us? I mean, we've been treated this way for a long time. You know, and I can sympathize with the people on the border, because you know why? My people, when they came to this country, they sold our children off like they didn't matter. You know, and we were like property. We were treated like the livestock. So it's just like you have a horse and you sell it for profit. So they took our babies and they sold them for profit. So when you see people from Mexico and other countries coming across that southern border and they're taking their kids away, I can sympathize with that. And I understand where they're coming from because of the things that we've been through. I mean, black people worked for free in this country for 400 years. And white people built wealth on that because they was getting free labor. That's the only reason they didn't want to end slavery, is because it was money out of their pocket, because now they didn't have free labor. You know, so all the profits didn't come to them anymore. But they still kept us in a state of bondage, even though slavery is abolished, supposed to be in this country. To me, people still live in slavery when they're living with a minimum wage. I mean, it's been a study done that shows that there's no place in this country that you can live off a minimum wage. Not one person. So is that not a state of bondage still? When, you know, you go for a job interview and you can't get the job because your name is the wrong name. You know, so automatically you get your resume get thrown out because of your name. I mean, you never even get the opportunity to see if you can get a job, you know, see if you can do the job, you know. And our kids arrested on regular basis for simple things. I mean, sometimes a white kid might do something stupid, and it is stupid when you go do these little dumb things, and they give them a slap on the wrist and say, go home and do this again and I'm going to arrest you. They don't give our kids that opportunity. They will arrest them the first time. Now they have a record. Now this record followed them through their life. I mean, and when you go for a job interview, they don't ask you what did you have a record for. You know, they just see that you have a record and automatically you don't get a job. You know, so there are so many things that hold people back. And when you have people of privilege, like, people don't realize that just because they are white that they have privilege, because they'll get further than I will get. You know, I can have a college degree and they can be a high school dropout and they'll get a job that I can't have. You know, and I've just seen so much racism in my life. I worked at a place in New Jersey, in West Orange. I was a food service manager there. But I had a boss over me. But she got fired, so I had to take over. And when I was looking through applications to fill a position, on the bottom in the right-hand corner in very small print, she had put black on every application of a black person that was there, that came in and applied for a job. That was a racist thing, because so she wouldn't call one of those people by mistake for a job. And then you hear, well, black people are lazy. No, they're not. They're looking for jobs. And I often say, why do they call us lazy? We were the slaves, and they were the ones sitting in the house out of the heat, and the slaves were working in the field. So who's the lazy person?
Yeah, very true. So we're running out of time, but I would like to hit one final question.
Okay.
So I guess how would you respond to, we see a lot of overt racism, and we know to respond to that, but in terms of covert racism, how do you respond to people who say, oh, I don't see race, or, oh, if you don't want racism in America, then stop making things a racist, black and white, brown issue. So what do you have to say to that, because that is a problem?
Well, what I say to that, if you don't see color, then you're basically lying, because when you look at a person, you see color. I mean, you may not take that in consideration, so you should say that color doesn't matter to me, rather than say I don't see color, just say color doesn't matter to me. And that's a more true statement than I don't see color. And I don't know, I guess that things that you say that's racist, when people say it's racist, it's because most of the time because they know that what they're saying or doing is racist. So don't tell me about the racism, don't bring race into everything, because most of the things, race is involved in it. And we just need to be more honest, just stop lying to ourselves, basically, and just be honest about things when you're talking about things like that. And like I said, it's a hot topic and people don't like to talk about it, but I feel much better if you come out and talk about it to me, say what you have to say. I can take that and we can move on from there. We can work on that, whatever it is. But if you don't say it, don't hide it from me, because you're not really hiding it, it's just that you're not saying it, but people know what it's all about. And that's one of the things that really needs to be changed.
Any last words from you, Lucy?
Well, I think probably when people say that, I probably just look at them like, I mean, that's outlandish. It is a lie, and I think it's just an attempt to say I'm not a racist, don't you?
Yes.
If they ask me why I look like that or what's going on with me, then I would try to have a conversation with them. Not as eloquently as Stella can say it from experience, and wow, that one blows my mind.
Yeah.
Do we have any time left?
We do. We can
Well,
take
I had a story at some point, I guess when you were talking about police, and I haven't had a lot of experience, but one night I was talking with a friend, and it was right at the time of Ferguson, and it just popped into my mind, a memory that I hadn't had. Well, I was in college when it happened, and I was at Duke on a date with my first husband, and I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but I know it must have been near the end of the evening, because we were in the car and we were pulled over, and a fraternity brother was driving the car, and I suspect, we all know how he was driving, because he got out of the car and he sauntered and he said, "What seems to be the trouble here, officer?" And I was spending the night with a friend who is black, and I said to her, "What would have happened?" I told her the story, and I said, this just came back to me. What would have happened if we were black? And she said, your ass would have been shut up in the jail so fast for having the impudence to talk like that. And I mean, that had not, I didn't think about it that way then. All I thought was, good God, he's ballsy, you know. Whoa! To talk to a policeman like that. I mean, I've been taught to respect policemen, you know, and my elders and all that. And he was just a youngster who was obviously drunk as a skunk and talking like that with all his white privilege. And I don't know who his daddy was or whatever, where he gotten that from, but it just, when I remembered it, it blew me away, because I knew pretty much when I asked her what would have happened if that person, I pretty much knew. It had just because of Ferguson and that memory, and they didn't go together. And this is some of what we want to uncover. And because of that, I want to invite all the viewers to attend. It's just $10 a plate, folks, our entrance fee. Next Tuesday night, the 10th, will actually be one day after the 150th anniversary of the ratification of the 14th Amendment. And we have as our speaker a white woman who's going to talk on how we have we have been trying to foil the 14th Amendment since 1900 or earlier. And it's been a group of fiercely dedicated white women who've been doing it. And it's still continuing, but they aren't having to work as hard because we got legislators now. And they were telling the legislators back then what to do and all other kinds of cultural things. She has written a book called Mothers of Massive Resistance, White Women and the Politics of White Supremacy. And I invite you to come and learn. It will be, and there'll be, if I have anything to do with it, there'll be a good chance for discussion after she speaks. And the dinner's going to be good too. Tickets are at the City Lights bookstore, and if you happen to know any members of the executive committee, we've got tickets too. That please let us know. And please attend.
Thank you so much for the two of you for coming out today. I hope everyone has gotten a lot out of this. I know I certainly have, and I hope you are able to attend next Tuesday's event as well. So,
thank you.
With all of that said, thank you for joining us at Mountain Stream TV today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.